Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here I bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of February 7th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of February 8th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, after Hamas gave its answer to Qatar and Egypt regarding the Paris plan that was agreed upon by the different parties that negotiated there, namely Israel, Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, today Reuters, CNN, and various different Arab sources reported leaks from what Hamas's response actually included. According to reports, I'm combining several different sources here, Hamas is demanding a three-phase deal. Each of them will include a 45-day truce, so we're talking about well over several months of a truce. In the first phase of the deal, women, children, and elderly or sick hostages will be released in exchange for Israel releasing all Palestinian prisoners who are women and children from Israeli jails, humanitarian aid substantially being increased into the Gaza Strip, rebuilding all hospitals and refugee camps, and an IDF withdrawal from central cities in the Gaza Strip. During this phase, there will be indirect talks about a complete ceasefire. In the second phase, there will be a complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. All remaining hostages will be released. In exchange, Hamas is demanding 1,500 Palestinian prisoners, including 500 who are sentenced to life in prison, i.e. the most heaviest prisoners that are in Israeli jails, who will be chosen by Hamas. The third stage will include the exchanging of bodies of hostages and Palestinian prisoners, concluding the negotiations initiated in the first phase and ending the war. According to different reports, Hamas included an addendum in its response. The addendum included also a list of demands. These are quite extensive. Among them are prisoners who are released will not be able to be arrested again for the same charge. B. Improving the conditions of Palestinian prisoners and removing restraints that were imposed on them since October 7th. C. Changing regulations regarding Jews entering Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif in Jerusalem and giving more control to the Islamic Waqf to determine when Jews can enter. D. Allowing 500 aid trucks to enter the Gaza Strip per day, including fuel trucks, to enter the entire Gaza Strip. D. Allowing Gazans to move north and complete freedom of movement within the Strip. E. Allowing heavy industrial equipment to enter the Gaza Strip to remove the rubble from the bombings. F. Bringing in 60,000 caravans and 200,000 tent shelters for the different internally displaced people. And G. Approving plans to rebuild structures, factories, and public facilities in the Gaza Strip within 3 years. CNN reported that senior Hamas official Muhammad Nazal stated that Hamas is insisting that the countries serving as guarantors in the deal will include Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, Russia, and the United Nations. So that is all the leaks regarding what Hamas's response was to the ongoing deal. Regarding this response, while visiting Israel, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated again that Hamas's answers create a platform to work on despite the non-starters within the agreement. In turn, in Israel, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated that Hamas's answer was formulated in a way to ensure that Israel would reject it. In a press conference today, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu also stated, and I quote, "Surrendering to the absurd demands of Hamas not only will not bring back the hostages or secure the release of any hostages, but will bring about another October 7th massacre." He was asked by a reporter if Israel responded no, and he answered, while not explicitly stating that Israel responded no, he answered, "You would have said no as well." Netanyahu added that Israel has not committed to anything, specifically not to the number or nature of Palestinian prisoners to be released, which he called absurd. Other news, Al Arabi Al Jadid reported that Hamas delegation headed by Khalil al-Hayya is going to arrive in Cairo tomorrow in order to continue the negotiations. There were other reports that there are going to be ongoing negotiations in Egypt about this. Amidst this, there were reports today in Israel that Israel is pressuring the different negotiators, specifically Egypt and Qatar, to in turn apply pressure on Hamas to bring back a different answer, i.e. to scratch this and not negotiate regarding this response, but to bring back a different response. Relating to this, in Egypt, Al-Qahara al-Akhbariya reported that Egypt is calling upon all sides to display the necessary flexibility to reach a ceasefire in Gaza, adding that this was mostly directed towards Hamas, calling on them to be flexible. Sky News in Arabic also reported that Qatar is offering Hamas different incentive packages to give up the demand of the IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, i.e. Qatar is recognizing Israel is not going to agree to that, trying to convince Hamas to ask for something else. Among these, it includes promises that Israel will release 3,000 to 5,000 Palestinian prisoners. Sources also stated that Qatari negotiators conveyed to Hamas an explicit Israeli threat that if the deal does not develop, the IDF is planning to invade Rafah. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip. Once again, there were no rockets or mortars sent from the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours towards Israel. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF published pictures of a substantial strategic tunnel It had uncovered several days ago in the Rimal area of Gaza City, adding that it was dug underneath the main UNRWA headquarters in the area. In addition, there were reports today in Jabalia refugee camp of substantial bombings in the area. I will note that the IDF's main activity right now in the north is more in the areas of Al-Shati refugee camp. However, the fact that there are now increased bombings in Jabalia refugee camp may be indicating that the IDF is planning to expand its northern operations towards Jabalia as well. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, today there were continuous reports of gun battles in the different central camps. However, there's no specific report about actual activity. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, where the main bulk of the fighting is going on in Han Yunis, there was intensive fighting reported in the western parts of Han Yunis, including face-to-face gun battles between the IDF and different Hamas operatives. Anti-tank missiles were also fired towards IDF units, and several different compounds were taken over by the IDF, uncovering substantial weaponry. In addition, the IDF uncovered a strategic Hamas tunnel that is over 1 kilometer long, including holding cells for hostages, a kitchen, and other staging areas. Intelligence found in the tunnel shows that 12 hostages were held there. According to the intelligence that was uncovered, 3 of the hostages include those that have already been returned to Israel in the previous truce in November, and the rest are still held in captivity elsewhere. The tunnel is connected to another tunnel that was exposed earlier, several days ago, and sacks of cement were discovered in the tunnel that were marked with UNRWA, with documentation showing that they were given to UNRWA and ended up in the hands of Hamas. When taking over the tunnel, intensive gun battles were reported within the tunnel itself, including explosives that were hid in different doorways. Moving on to Rafah, there was an assassination carried out in Rafah today. Majid Abdel Al, a senior commander of Hamas's police force in Rafah, was reportedly assassinated when missiles hit his car. He was reportedly responsible for stability of Hamas's regime in the Rafah sector and was continuing his activities while the city right now is housing all of these other refugees. He was reportedly assassinated when missiles hit his car. Several other people were killed. Relating to a possible future operation of the IDF in Rafah, there were several different reports today. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated while in Israel that the U.S. is very concerned about the IDF operations in the city. In turn, Defense Minister Alon told Antony Blinken that Hamas's position on the hostage deal will lead to a continuation of the war and our forces going into new places in Gaza very soon. The last major new place that remains is Rafah. In addition to that, the Wall Street Journal reported that the IDF is continuing to develop its Rafah plans, quoting Israeli senior officials saying that the war cannot be concluded without dismantling Hamas's smuggling tunnels from Egypt to Rafah. Reportedly that there are at least 12 tunnels that remain underneath the Rafah crossing connecting Gaza to Sinai. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also stated today that he's very worried about reports that the IDF is going to move into Rafah next, adding this will contribute to the humanitarian disaster that is already present. Other news, Hamas today published a denial of the IDF claims yesterday that the IDF claimed that it had uncovered evidence of $150 million that Iran had transferred to Hamas between 2014 and 2020. The IDF found documents in different Hamas offices and tunnels and published them. Hamas denied this, saying that is all a lie. Regarding casualties, one IDF soldier was reported killed today in the Gaza Strip. He actually was injured several weeks ago and died today, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers that have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 227. The total number of IDF soldiers that were injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began remains 1,304. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting 123 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 27,708, 67,174 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip, and there are still several thousand buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the IDF is reportedly setting up roadblocks around the Kerem Shalom crossing in order to stop Israeli protesters from trying to block aid trucks on their way into Gaza. Relating to the protests blocking humanitarian aid, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken stated today that Israelis underwent dehumanization on October 7th, and so are the hostages undergoing dehumanization every day, but that is not licensed to do so to others, i.e. he's calling upon people to stop blocking humanitarian aid from civilians in the Gaza Strip. In addition to this, other humanitarian news, there was increased reports today of diseases that are spreading through the refugee camps due to a lack of clean water access, specifically in the areas in the Al-Muasi section north of Rafah. Other news, there was a humanitarian pause declared today by the IDF in the western parts of Rafah for 4 hours, between the hours of 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Other news, during their meeting today between Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Blinken reportedly stated that while he is shocked by October 7th, at the same time, entire families that have nothing to do with Hamas have been killed in the Gaza Strip, and he will ask himself every day of his life about them. Netanyahu reportedly responded that Hamas bears the responsibility since it operates from within civilian population. Regarding the entrance of aid trucks, no reports were made regarding how many aid trucks entered in the last 24 hours. This may be associated with those different blockings. However, usually aid trucks are entering, but since the protests began, neither the IDF, nor the United Nations, nor the Palestinian Red Crescent are giving daily reports regarding how many aid trucks did manage to enter. Moving on to the West Bank, there's substantial IDF activity reported in several different areas of the West Bank. In the Nur Shams refugee camp near Tulkarem, the IDF entered the area in order to carry out arrests. After a 4-hour operation where they were closing in on the house of a wanted Palestinian and applying what is called pressure cooker procedure, which is surrounding the house, calling the Palestinian to exit the house, and if he refuses, then starting to gradually launch missiles, anti-tank missiles into the house in order to force them out. Eventually, a gun battle ensued, resulting in that Palestinian's death. 2 more Palestinians were reported killed in the confrontation, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the area of Nur Shams to 3 in the last 24 hours. Other substantial IDF activity was reported in the area of Hebron. There were no reports made about how many Palestinians were actually arrested throughout the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon. There were continuous rockets and missiles sent from Lebanon targeting the northern parts of Israel today, however less than in recent days. Rockets targeted the areas of Hardov, Goren in the western Galilee, Margaliot in the upper Galilee, and the areas of Shtula. Regarding IDF activity, IDF warplanes attacked Hezbollah infrastructure, lookout posts, and military compounds in the El Hiam village of southern Lebanon. The IDF noted that this is a very big hotbed of Hezbollah activity, and that 6 of Hezbollah attacks have occurred from this area. Other attacks were reported in the areas of Meruhin against Hezbollah military structures, and against Hezbollah infrastructure in the Bani Hiyan village. El Akhbar in Lebanon reported the drone attacks participated in the attacks in El Hiam, and that at least 1 person was killed in the region. In addition, Lebanese sources reported substantial wave of artillery fire from the IDF, targeting the areas of Ramia, Ramish, Beit Lif, Yarun, Hula, and Marhaba. Other attacks were also reported in Rashia el-Hafar, as well as the village of Hammam. In addition to this, Saudi Al-Hadith reported today of low IDF flyovers in the areas of both Beirut and Tripoli. This was unconfirmed by any other source, so it's unclear what exactly happened, but that was the report in Al-Hadith. Other news, Hezbollah stated today that 2 more of its operatives were killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Hezbollah operatives that have been killed since the war began that the group is announcing to 184. Earlier in the day, the Syrian Human Rights Observatory reported that 2 Hezbollah operatives were killed in the Homs attack in Syria that was reported yesterday. It is unconfirmed if those were the 2 that Hezbollah was referring to or if the 2 incidents are separate. In that Homs attack, 8 people were reportedly killed, and the Saudi Al-Hadith stated that the site that was attacked included commanders from Iran and from Hezbollah. Israel made no comment regarding if it actually took responsibility for that attack or not. Moving on to some of the regional developments, Wissam Muhammad al-Saadi, also known as Abu Bakr Saadi, is a commander in Hezbollah and Iraq brigades, was assassinated in a drone attack in his car in Baghdad. Saudi Al-Hadith reported that Saadi was the one who planned and executed the drone attack on Tower 22 base of the United States. In addition to him, Sky News in Arabic reported that another commander in the group, Arkahan al-Alawi, was also killed. In total, 4 people were killed in this attack. The Pentagon later announced that the United States takes responsibility for that attack and that it is part of the retaliation against the attacks against Tower 22 that killed 3 U.S. service people. CNN also quoted different U.S. sources stating this does not conclude the U.S. retaliation in the area. Hours after the attack, El Miadin reported explosions occurred in the U.S. base near the Deir Azur area in Syria. The Pentagon made no mention of these attacks. And moving on to the Yemeni front, there were several different reports today. El Miadin reported 2 attacks were carried out in the Ras Isa area of the As-Salib region, as well as in the Hudaydah area and the Saada region, attributing all these to the U.S.-led coalition. In addition to this, the Houthis reportedly fired 6 nautical ballistic missiles towards different ships in the region. One of these caused damage to a freight ship in the area. Other news, the Saudi Al Arabiya network reported that the EU has approved its own operation to ensure safety of maritime travel in the Red Sea. Codenamed Espidas, it will be headed by Greece and will begin operating on February 19th, securing the maritime travel both in the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden. Moving on to the political and general trends of the last 24 hours, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met with Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. Abbas thanked Blinken for his support of a 2-state solution and emphasized that that is what is necessary for peace and prosperity in the region. Other news, French President Macron spoke today in an event marking 4 months since October 7th. He condemned Hamas's barbarism and called October 7th the largest anti-Semitic massacre this century. His speech was also broadcasted live in a protest rally in Israel, which is one of the many protests that have occurred in Israel of the family members of hostages and their supporters calling upon Israel to accept any deal and bring the hostages back. On the news, Russian President Vladimir Putin stated today that Russia is working on its own to secure the release of hostages from the Gaza Strip. He noted that this is the reason that Russia is actually holding meetings with different officials within Hamas. No reports are made regarding what those efforts actually include. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, in a press conference given today, Prime Minister Netanyahu was asked about the day after plan, what is going to be in the Gaza Strip. He answered, and I quote, "The day after is the day after Hamas. After we dismantle Hamas, we will ensure that Gaza is completely demilitarized. There is only one force that can ensure demilitarization, the State of Israel. That means that Israel will operate anywhere and everywhere that's necessary in Gaza to ensure that terrorism does not lift its head again. He added, there are two principles. First, you need to destroy Hamas, then you need to ensure demilitarization. You can enable civilian management with those elements that do not support Hamas or terrorism. So again, what we're seeing is Prime Minister Netanyahu is stating that as far as he's concerned, Israel is going to be the only one to maintain security control of the Gaza Strip. That is not going to be handed over to anyone else. However, again, giving a nod to the idea that there could be a different civilian administration that will not be Israel that may be able to take responsibility for the area. Other news, the U.S. State Department reported today that in the meeting between Blinken and Netanyahu, Blinken reiterated U.S. support for establishing a Palestinian state as the best way to ensure long-lasting peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Amidst these reports of the U.S. support for establishing a Palestinian state, later in the day it was reported that Secretary of State Blinken told Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian Authority chairman, that the United States will recognize a Palestinian state in 2024. Importantly, PA Chairman Abbas was reported to be negotiating with Hamas about establishing a unity government. Jibril Rajoub is serving as negotiator. This may be pivotal because one of the terms that different states have given has been both for a reform in the Palestinian Authority, however also for some answer for what is going to be Hamas's role, considering that it may not be completely destroyed. So what is going to be their role in the government? And possibly Palestinian Authority chairman is trying to come up with his own plan to show this is going to be Hamas's diminished role within the government in order to accept that recognition of statehood later on. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.